This is the IS-2 heavy tank, used by the Soviet ground forces starting in 1944 and lasting until the 1970s. It had a huge 122mm gun and somewhat thick armor. And for this video, I'm also being joined by...
Me, Hazel. Or as some of you may better know me, that guy from that livestream that time.
Oh. Alright. Oh, so you're the T-34-100.
Yes, that's an iconic tank. I love this thing. This is my baby.
Can I kill you?
Yes, so a little bit of my help has been employed on this occasion to make this video just a little bit more fun. I love big guns, and I love injecting a bit of whimsy into anything and everything I come across, as most watchers of my channel might be familiar with. Now, Shim and I both have our respective strengths, and I am here to cover on the bits that I am, as I have been told, pretty alright at.
I know the KB twins want the call for the next historical tank I'll be doing, but I kind of hit a roadblock and I had a lot of school stuff happening around me. aka I'm going for like my large exams in like less than a week from this recording. So I decided to choose a second runner-up, which will be my IS-2. God, I think I love this tank. I made like 3 videos on it. I think I have an addiction for this character, or the tank itself. Anyways, you're here for the IS-2, right? Of course, you click on the video for a reason. Anyways, let's get to the point and talk about it.
Now, the first big thing about heavy tanks such as this is the fear factor. The imposing nature of something bigger and better than yourself pointing a gun at you, wanting you and all your friends dead. So I find a little bit of a second-person perspective story to be in order. Yeah, we're not delving into the IS-2 directly quite just yet. Bear with me and picture this, if you will, for a second. So, you're standing in the commander's position of a tiger, trundling along through the terrain of the Eastern Front. It's somewhere in April, and the mud that bogs down movement in the previous months is starting to dry up a little. Your 40-ton beast of a machine can certainly still feel the toll of the conditions, however. Then you see a silhouette of a tank in the distance. An enemy tank, definitely, judging by its sloped hull and round turret. No German tank looks like that. A T-34? Seems so. Which means you should be safe. Your higher-ups have always told you, after all, that just a bit of careful positioning and distance will make a Tiger invulnerable to any Soviet gun. 45, 76, 85, the Tiger does not concern itself with any of these calibers. Anyway, time to kill these T-34s. Your gunner sends an 8.8cm round towards one of these T-34s, hitting it squarely in the middle of the turret. Yet it somehow hasn't exploded in a great big ball of fire. How odd. The tank has its sights on you now. It fires, but that's fine. The Tiger will survive. You'll be fine. You are dead. What you have just witnessed, though of course not in full due to your aforementioned state of deadness, is the first time an IS-2 heavy tank ever engaged German heavies. I believe it fought a couple Panzer IVs on 10th of March that same year, but that wouldn't really make for a great story now, would it? Anyway, back to the topic, the IS-2. Looks quite a little bit like a T-34 from distance, doesn't it? Only discernible difference being the muzzle brake. I'm sure the Soviets will take advantage of this similarity in the future. Anyway, this is what happened to you. Or, well, I guess what happened to your Tiger might be a more accurate statement, since it's quite safe to say not a single square inch of you is actually in the picture, or still in this tank for that matter. You're now fertilizer spread across a couple square meters of Ukrainian land. What did this to you, then, is a 122mm gun. You're familiar with this gun, aren't you? A piece of towed artillery you're told by higher-ups is actually to be worried about. Yeah, the Soviets managed to jam the great big thing into a tank turret. Deal with it. Or don't really, not like you're alive to lament anyway. Here's Shim to tell you more about how in the hell they did it.
Before you even talk about the IS-2, we need to go back to the IS-1 and how it came about. So to dump it down, since this is the IS-2 video, the IS-1 was a love child of the KV-13 and KV-85, and that's about it. The Soviets weren't really satisfied with the IS-1, as the T-34-85 was already fielding the 85 and the IS-1 was also using the 85. It was just a heavier T-34 that didn't offer any firepower advantage, so what did they do? Yeah, they tried to shove in a 100mm gun called the BS3, which was tested on the SE100, which was called the IS100. A 122 was also tested called the A19, and it was called IS122. Both tanks were put against each other in tests to see who will win the title of IS2. In the end, the A19 won. 2,252 IS2 were built with the A19 gun, which was found out to be very underwhelming due to the 122 gun being not able to penetrate most of the German tanks. But the HE1s could nuke the crew and atomize them into the other world, so that's the good thing going for it, which is funny.
Right. That's enough out of Shin about these big guns. This is my field of expertise after all. So let me continue and tell you guys about the competition between the 100 and 122mm guns. Both of them gave plenty of firepower to vaporize Jerry, all his friends, the panzer they're sitting in, and quite possibly any infantry nearby enough to be caught in the blast, just as Shin said. As for what Shin said about the 122 being underwhelming, ignore all that. By the time of the late war, the Germans had run dry on some alloying materials such as molybdenum and nickel, so their armor got brittle enough to be shattered by 122mm gun impacts. And if that weren't enough firepower for you, you lunatic, don't worry, I'm one as well. There's also the 152mm gun used in the ISU-152 that was built on this same IS-2 chassis, fittingly named the Sphero Boy or Beast Killer, as it managed to do this to a Panther. Yes, I imagine the typical engagement went something along the lines of, "Hey Ivan, you see that tank over there?
Yes, Commander.
Well, I don't want to anymore. Get rid of it."
Yes, Commander.
Anyway, in this video we're only really talking about the turreted variants, so the battle between the 100 and 122mm guns is more relevant. This competition was a rather interesting one. The 122 was basically a gigantic field artillery piece rammed into the tank turret, while the 100 was a high-velocity hard hitter, which was tested in the SE100, the SE100, but not the SE100. Both of them had their strengths and weaknesses. The 100 had a better flat trajectory penetration and a much better rate of fire. As any Object 248 using Seal Clubber will joyously tell you, having a reload that is as long as a German main's average life expectancy is quite a useful prospect. In comparison, the 122 packed a far greater high explosive payload, making it a much better general purpose gun that could also engage infantry positions when needed. And also, tooling and supply chains were much better for this gun, as a larger stash of 122 rounds was readily available. As any halfway decent strategist will unanimously tell you, logistics is an army's lifeline, and versatility is huge in importance too. So in the end, the 122 was chosen. Now, back to Shin for the armor, because I frankly could not be bothered with that bit.
Anyways, after the A19 122, the D25T came along to replace it. The IS-2 at the earliest production models had a step front similar to the KV-1s, which was not great at tanking shots, but afterwards it was standardized to be a uniform armor where it was angled at 60 degrees with 100mm of armor. Some sources stated that only 1,150 of these types of IS-2s were built after May of 1945. All production were halted for a short, cocky IS-3, which, funnily enough, was supposed to replace the IS-2, but in the end, well, it failed spectacularly and fell on its face. So yeah, this is the interesting development of the IS-2 heavy tanks. Let's move on to its combat history. Well, the way of the IS-2s being deployed was not really what we would expect. You normally think the IS-2 will be deployed to all regiments on the front line, however instead, they were only deployed to the Elite Guard Battalion where they would hammer strong points when encountered, and its HE shell was a very good cream pie grenade. A lot of the German tanks like the Tiger and Panther were easily destroyed by one HE blast. Overall, there was a lot of engagements where Soviets claimed to destroy no less than 41 Tigers and Ferdinands.
Quick side note. Soviet reports called all casemates Ferdinands. Only one of these vehicles destroyed by an IS-2 throughout the entire war has been confirmed to be an actual Ferdinand/Elefant. Most of them were just Jagdpanzers and Sturmgeschützen.
claiming to only lose around 8 tanks. It was also used on mortar with its HE rounds as it can blow up buildings with immense explosiveness like a person after Taco Bell. Now we should talk about the enemies the IS-2 were faced on the battlefield during the war. It normally faced off panzers which were literally a coughing baby versus the atomic bombs. So we are not going to be interested in that. What are we interested in is the bigger cats the IS-2 faced, like the famous Panthers, Tiger 1s and Tiger 2s and the Ferdinand it faced. When stacked against the Panther and the Tiger 1, the IS-2 pretty much would always win the engagement on pure raw performance due to its gun being significantly stronger and gun and armor being stronger, while the Panther is a medium tank. Keep in mind, it weighed as much as the IS-2, which was classified as a heavy tank, which means it's either the IS-2 was underweight or the Panther needs some exercise, which I tend to believe as the reasoning why the Panther is so heavy. For the Tiger 1, it's pretty much the same, but we are more interested in the infamous Tiger 2. In terms of raw stats, the IS-2 would tend not to like to fight it and will run away due to the fact that the Tiger 2 has ridiculously good frontal armor, thick skull compared to any other tanks in the battlefield. Firepower wise, the 122 overhead better performance, but the 8.8 KWK have better penetration, so on a one-on-one engagement, the IS-2 against the Tiger 2 is not favorable whatsoever. So I'm pretty sure in the war, most Soviet tankers didn't really want to go against it, but in later war, since Germany used more and more inferior alloys for building the tanks, more and more Soviet crew could pretty much just blow it up due to the fact that the metals were structurally weaker, therefore leading to a lot of photos of Tigers blowing up from IS-2's indirect hits from HE shells or from the shell's immense impact force. Overall, the IS-2 was a pretty much effective heavy tank, served the Union well, and was one of the heavy tanks that worked pretty well and didn't actively kill itself. Anyways, let's move on to combat and learn how to play the IS-2 in a hit game we all love and hate called War Thunder. Before we move on to its gameplay on how you should play this one-shot wonder of a tank, we need to talk about its overall stats. There are 2 IS-2 in the game at the moment that are pretty much like copy and pasted in a lot of tech trees, which are the 1943 and the 1944. Both tanks offer the similar guns like the 122 D25T, but the 1943 lacks the APCBC round, which we'll get to in a moment. While the 122 D25T gun is a lot of guns we love and hate, myself I love it, but it has a moment called volumetric, where the shell just didn't call on random stuff like a random fence, it would just hit the fence and it would just explode instead of hitting the guy, even though it shouldn't do it. Anyways, recently Gaijin did a lot of BR changes for a ton of tanks, which were questionable as hell. Some got moved up which they weren't deserving, and some got moved down for no reason. And for specifically the Soviets, they have a lot of random tanks got buffed, but I think the ones that got the best out of it were the IS-2 twins. All the IS-2s were for some reason all moved down by a 0.3 BR, so yes, all other nations' mains cower in fear as the large IS-2 early haul versions can pretty much just dump the entire load onto you in one shot. But overall, the early haul gameplay is still the same, since you still have the early KV-1 step haul design, which is like not the best armor layout. However, for the 1944, it is pretty much a fuck up on Gaijin's side since it's at a 6.3 BR, which means you have not much tanks that can pretty much kill you other than some GMCs or Hunters killing you, but then again, who knows how to kill angle armor, am I right? So pretty much you can confidently rush in, hold W, and you will survive unless it's a Japanese heat round or like some random lucky shot. But overall, you're not just a ready back tank, but you do have the amazingly 20-second reload, which means you can't really just play very aggressively. But pretty much the ISOs now are not very pathetic anymore, but you can just pretty much kill anyone instantaneously by staring in the direction. But if I were to recommend how to play this in a nutshell, just shoot, reverse, rinse and repeat, but not so aggressively.
Yes, and as per my tradition then, here are my ratings for the IS-2s in the old tier list. And since Shin doesn't seem to have already said it, thank you for watching.